They imagined a $50,000 barrier could bar me from my own property. Instead, it has transformed into my private collection point. Just imagine the scene. You return from a cattle auction only to discover your access road obstructed by an 8-foot privacy fence. This wasn't just any access road. It was the one my grandfather constructed with his own 2 hands back in 1962. The same road that has belonged to my family for 6 decades. It's the very route these new arrivals have utilized daily to reach their upscale subdivision. But here is the truly satisfying part. That unlawful fence is now earning me $500 each time one of them requires passage across my land. This amounts to $2,000 monthly, and the figure continues to rise. The head of the HOA, the one who initiated this entire conflict, is now contending with federal charges and has had her home foreclosed on. How would you react if your neighbors attempted to seize your land using a bogus fence and an arrogant demeanor? Leave a comment below. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Have you ever encountered a domineering HOA? Believe me, this tale is only beginning. My name is Ezra Thornfield, and I am a member of what you might consider a vanishing line. I'm a 3rd-generation cattle rancher in Millbrook County, Texas. My grandfather acquired this 240-acre expanse in 1962, armed with calloused hands and a dream far exceeding his financial means. My father enlarged it through sheer toil and determination. As for me, I've been fighting tooth and nail to hold on to it, with my wife Sarah, the most skilled veterinarian in 3 counties, and our 2 college-age children, who haven't forgotten the meaning of hard work. The ranch is situated at the terminus of Cottonwood Creek Road, a private gravel path my grandfather personally laid, hauling stones in a dilapidated Ford that shed more oil than the Exxon Valdez. Each morning at 5:00 a.m., I travel that very same path in my father's 1987 F-250. My coffee mug is practically fused to the dashboard from years of Texas sun and sheer stubbornness. The truck's interior smells of diesel, aged leather, and honest labor. All things these new neighbors appear to despise. This is where things became complicated. When my granddad laid that road, his motive was fostering community spirit. The initial easement agreement was as straightforward as a Sunday service. Neighbors were permitted to use the road for access to their land and were to assist in its upkeep. But they could never, under any circumstances, block our family's passage. This arrangement worked seamlessly for 40 years, right up until the newcomers arrived. This brings us to Vivian Blackwood. Picture the offspring of a corporate attorney and a suburban Karen, subsequently nurtured on a diet of entitlement and Botox. At 58 years old, she pilots a pearl-white BMW X7 that has never encountered a speck of real mud. She is perpetually clad in designer athletic wear, as if she were en route to a yoga session, when in reality she is orchestrating your downfall. She made her entrance into Willowbrook Estates, the uniform subdivision that had sprung up at our roads end like a form of architectural malignancy. Vivian's objective became glaringly apparent the day she cornered me at Murphy's Hardware. I was simply going about my day, buying fence staples, when she approached with a predatory grin, her Bluetooth earpiece flashing like a cyborg's holiday light. "Ezra, I have a generous offer for your establishment," she announced. She said, "establishment," as if it were a gentleman's club. "It's not for sale, ma'am. This property remains with the family." Her manufactured smile faltered just enough to show the predator beneath. "People like you fail to grasp the concept of progress, Ezra. This location holds immense potential for enhancement." The manner in which she stressed "people like you," while glancing at my work boots and sweat-marked John Deere cap, made her meaning clear even to a simple cow. I gave a tip of my hat, turned away, and heard her BMW hum out of the parking area, stirring up our genuine Texas dust on its return journey to suburbia. That was the beginning of the psychological battle. Infraction notices began to materialize in my mailbox. Resembling anonymous threatening letters, there were odor complaints about livestock activities, noise infractions for running agricultural machinery before 7 a.m., and citations for unsightly farm equipment being visible from a public road. Each one was embossed with the absurd Willowbrook Estates HOA seal, a small tree emblem that likely cost more than my monthly feed expenses. I chuckled and used them as kindling. You see, what Vivian's legal education evidently failed to impart was that the HOA possessed about as much jurisdiction over my private land as my barn cat had over NASA. However, Vivian had not concluded her little games. Community gatherings began to proliferate like unwanted vegetation. Concerned citizens for neighborhood standards, they called themselves, and signed complaints inundated the Millbrook Gazette, citing decreasing property values and incompatible land usage. It was amusing how these grievances always originated from individuals who had resided here for about as long as a carton of milk stays fresh in the summer. Then came that Tuesday morning in October, the day that altered everything. I was transporting 30 head of premium Black Angus from the Abilene auction, with a trailer valued higher than most cars. When I rounded the curve toward my home and slammed on the brakes so forcefully that my coffee mug finally dislodged from the dashboard, 8 feet of animosity, disguised as a privacy fence, spanned Cottonwood Creek Road like an extended wooden middle finger. The scent of new lumber mingled with my escalating blood pressure as I exited the truck. A freshly installed sign proclaimed, "Private Road, Willowbrook Estates, Residents Only," and there stood Vivian, with her constant clipboard, accompanied by 2 HOA board members who seemed as ill at ease as felines in a kennel. "A security enhancement," she declared, her face almost radiant with triumph. "You will need to find an alternative means of accessing your property." I gazed at the fence obstructing the road my grandfather had built. Rock by rock, and a feeling inside me transitioned from a slow burn to a roaring blaze. "This is my family's road, Vivian, constructed with my grandfather's own labor." "It was your road?" she retorted, her smile as sharp as a surgical instrument. Democracy in action. It was at that moment I understood that this suburban predator had just committed the most significant error of her impeccably groomed life. Standing there, watching my cattle grow agitated in the trailer as Vivian smirked from behind her unauthorized fence, I was certain of one thing: this conflict would not be resolved with polite words and iced tea. My initial destination was Garrett Mills, the most astute property attorney in 3 counties and an old high school friend who still owed me for helping him pass calculus. His office had the aroma of leather-bound legal tomes and the sort of self-assurance that comes from a perfect record in land disputes. "Ezra, they've made a colossal mistake," Garrett said with a grin, laying out yellow documents on his mahogany desk as if he were playing a hand of cards. "This 1962 easement agreement grants your family an unending and sole right of entry and exit." He indicated the faded signature with his pen. "Remember what my dad used to say about easements? They're like herpes. Once you have them, you can never get rid of them. These things are tied to the land indefinitely, and no HOA vote can alter that." I had come to understand that lesson the hard way after purchasing the Johnson property 10 years prior. It came with a utility easement I was unable to get rid of, despite it bisecting my prime pasture. Now that legal nuisance was set to become Vivian's worst nightmare, Garrett dispatched a cease and desist letter more quickly than I could. Lasso a calf, calling for the fence's removal within 48 hours. I thought that would be the end of it. It just goes to show my naivety when it came to dealing with entitled suburbanites who possess law degrees and an excess of free time. Vivian's reply was delivered via her lawyer friend from Dallas, a representative of some polished firm that billed more per hour than I earned in a week. Their counterclaim was that the easement had lapsed due to lack of use and that my cattle business was commercial activity, which was not compatible with residential standards. Following that was the ultimate affront. A settlement offer: I could request daily access permits for $25 each, which had to be submitted 72 hours beforehand and were contingent on a review of community impact. In essence, I would have to get Vivian's approval to use my own road to tend to my own cattle. "Not on your life," I declared to Sarah that evening, over reheated pot roast and mounting exasperation. She simply offered that knowing smile of hers and handed me a business card. "Rodriguez from County Planning, he's in charge of building permits." This is where my many years of subscribing to Fine Homebuilding magazine proved beneficial. I was aware that all significant construction jobs required permits, particularly for fences exceeding 6 feet in height. After one anonymous call, Inspector Rodriguez appeared at Willowbrook's main entrance like an unwelcome financial audit. He glanced at that 8-foot monument to suburban animosity and issued a stop-work order faster than a rattlesnake could strike. "Ma'am, you are not permitted to construct whatever you please without the proper authorizations," Rodriguez informed a flushed Vivian. "This fence is obstructing a recognized easement and is in violation of county setback regulations." The sound of Vivian's self-assurance shattering was more gratifying than Sarah's Sunday peach cobbler, but if I believed that a minor detail like building regulations would chasten our HOA tyrant, I had seriously misjudged the extent of suburban privilege. The subsequent HOA gathering transformed into a full-blown council of war, with Vivian asserting that their security enhancements had been sabotaged. Her ingenious plan was to escalate by constructing a second fence at the official property line. It was then that the local ranching community concluded they had witnessed enough of this urban cowgirl act. On Saturday morning, my phone began to ring before our rooster had even cleared his throat. By 6:00 a.m., there were 23 pickup trucks forming a line on County Road 47. Their diesel engines rumbled like a mechanical storm, prepared for what we tactfully termed an educational convoy. There was nothing unlawful about it, just neighbors showing solidarity with neighbors, using our God-given constitutional freedom to travel on public roads and voice our views through the time-honored practice of honking. The chorus of 24 air horns sounding off past Willowbrook Estates at exactly 6:15 a.m. was a sound glorious enough to bring a tear to a grown man's eye. Vivian contacted Sheriff Patterson within 5 minutes, insisting on arrests for what she called noise terrorism. "Ma'am," the sheriff clarified with barely hidden mirth, "honking is not against the law on county roads. You might want to consider investing in some higher quality windows or perhaps some earplugs." Later that afternoon, I concluded that my cattle also needed some educational movement. A herd of 40 of my best longhorns required daily activity for their well-being, and County Road 47 just happened to be the ideal route for a relaxed Sunday stroll. It was entirely legal and perfectly timed for when the Willowbrook residents were holding their weekly barbecues on their immaculate patios, the genuine scent of Texas. A blend of road dust, fresh manure, and unadulterated freedom wafted through their climate-controlled mansions, serving as a natural dose of reality. Vivian's pearl-white BMW got a special layer of honest grime, and her threats of a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress only made my evening beer taste all the better. However, our suburban Napoleon was not done escalating the conflict. The HOA approved the hiring of private security at a cost of $8,000 per month, essentially professional harassment at upscale suburban rates, to record every ranch vehicle that used their road. I countered with a surveillance enhancement of my own, setting up trail cameras along the fence's edge. In less than a week, I had collected Academy Award-worthy clips of the security guards littering, trespassing onto my land, and one especially noteworthy shot of a guard relieving himself behind my barn. All this evidence was sent directly to County Commissioner Jackson, a hunting partner of mine and a well-known stickler for environmental rules. "Ezra," he called that evening with a laugh, "these hired guards are committing more infractions than a college fraternity. Keep recording everything." The truly beautiful development occurred when Garrett found out that Vivian had violated the Texas Open Meetings Act. State laws mandate a 72-hour public notification for any HOA spending over $5,000. Their urgent security meeting had been announced with only 12 hours notice and no public announcement. "Every decision related to the fence is legally invalid," Garrett clarified, practically purring with contentment. "We can sue them for everything." As I sat on my porch that evening, watching my cattle graze where they should be, it dawned on me that Vivian believed she was engaged in a game of chess while I was playing checkers. It turned out we were both mistaken. I was actually playing poker, and she had just revealed her entire hand. The following morning, as I was enjoying my coffee on the porch, Sarah came out holding a stack of documents as thick as a telephone directory and wearing that resolute expression I had come to respect over our 23 years together. "We are headed to the courthouse," she declared. "It's time to find some leverage." As it happens, my veterinarian wife possessed a hidden talent. She had spent her youth assisting her father with property dispute research for his surveying company, while my expertise lay in cattle and hay prices. Sarah could interpret deed records with the skill of a seasoned detective. The Millbrook County Clerk's office had an aroma of aged paper and unfulfilled aspirations, with fluorescent lights humming above rows of dusty ledgers containing 60 years of the area's history. Sarah immersed herself in those records as if she were conducting a surgical procedure, systematic and exacting. "I found something," she murmured after a couple of hours of searching. Her finger moved across a faded federal document from 1967. "Your grandfather didn't just construct that road with his own funds, he utilized a federal agricultural improvement grant." I recalled my granddad mentioning some form of government assistance, but I had never given it much thought. It appeared that the grant was accompanied by conditions, permanent conditions. The funding stipulated that the road must always remain accessible for agricultural vehicle use, Sarah had become familiar with these federal land grants during her pre-veterinary studies at A&M, where it was taught that the terms of federal grants are perpetual. Obstructing your access is a breach of the federal funding agreement, Sarah clarified, her excitement growing. They could be compelled to refund the entire grant, plus 40 years of accrued interest. We did the math on my phone's calculator. $340,000 in current currency. In addition to 4 decades of compounded interest, all of a sudden, Vivian's fence appeared to be the costliest error in the history of Millbrook County. However, while we were gathering legal firepower, Vivian was engaging in underhanded tactics. She retained a private investigator, some unscrupulous individual from Dallas who specialized in background checks, to uncover any compromising information about my family. The investigator discovered precisely what one would anticipate from 40 years of honest ranching. A minor infraction for cattle waste runoff from 1995, which resulted in an $800 fine, it was ancient history, had been properly addressed, and the matter was closed. Vivian brandished that 28-year-old citation at the subsequent HOA meeting as though she had unearthed the Watergate tapes, threatening to file a complaint with the EPA unless I complied with community improvement efforts. Feel free. I responded to her at the supermarket, loud enough for half the town to overhear. The statute of limitations on that ran out back when Clinton was still in office. Sarah, on the other hand, was establishing our own network for information gathering. Through her connections at veterinary conferences, she located an environmental attorney who specialized in the rights of farmers. This lawyer agreed to assist us pro bono after learning of our situation. It seemed she had also grown up on a ranch before being displaced by suburban expansion. The lawyer's investigation uncovered something wonderful. Vivian's prized fence was in fact in violation of wetland protection regulations. It turned out that Cottonwood Creek Road was built on an old creek bed, which is designated as an intermittent waterway according to state environmental laws. While I was getting educated on wetland violations, Vivian attempted a different strategy. Property taxes. She persuaded the county assessor, Williams, a golfing acquaintance from Dallas, to reassess my ranch at commercial property rates, arguing that the road was being used for commercial development. My tax bill skyrocketed from $4,200 to $18,500 per year. Williams asserted that my ranch road should be taxed commercially because it was benefiting a commercial development, yet he had never set foot on the property to inspect it, relying solely on Vivian's account. I filed an appeal faster than a greased pig, and during the hearing, it came to light that Williams had breached standard assessment protocols by failing to perform a physical inspection. This was another legal infraction to add to our mounting list. But it was Sarah's late-night internet searches that yielded the true breakthrough. She was looking into Vivian's history for our lawyer when she stumbled upon something remarkable. Vivian wasn't merely a retired attorney. She was a disbarred attorney. The California State Bar had revoked her license in 2018 for embezzling $250,000 from the trust account of an elderly client. She had relocated to Texas and had somehow managed to obtain a new bar number using slightly altered credentials. But the criminal conviction was still documented in black and white. She has been practicing law illegally this entire time, Sarah explained, presenting the court records on her laptop. Texas law mandates that HOA officials must declare any criminal convictions. The following weekend, we held what Sarah termed a ranch defense barbecue. 60 neighbors convened in our pasture for brisket, beer, and some honest conversation. The older residents recounted tales of the original road construction, with their own fathers laboring alongside my granddad during the sweltering summer of 1962. The most poignant part of the evening was when 84-year-old Pete Morrison came over with a time-worn leather photograph album. Within its pages were yellowed newspaper clippings from the road's dedication, showing my granddad shaking hands with the county commissioner as a dozen neighbors watched with pride. "Your granddad said this road would benefit the community for generations to come," Pete reminisced, his weathered hands shaking as he handled the delicate pages. It's ironic how that very community is now attempting to exclude the family that constructed it. The archives of the Millbrook Gazette, located in the library's basement, provided further valuable finds. Articles that described the federal grant, the community's collaboration, and my family's role. A particular quote from my granddad caused a lump in my throat. "This road will serve as a connection for our neighbors for many years to come." In the meantime, Vivian's support within her own HOA was rapidly diminishing. A number of residents protested when she proposed special assessments of $5,000 per household to finance the legal battle. The treasurer resigned upon finding discrepancies in the fence contracting, which seemed to involve Vivian's brother-in-law's fence company. The truly beautiful development occurred when Garrett found out that Vivian had never revealed her disbarment to the HOA board. Texas law mandates a complete declaration of any criminal convictions for all HOA officers. Her failure to fulfill her fiduciary responsibilities exposed her to personal liability. For every choice she had made, she's not just in the wrong, I said to Sarah that evening. She's been violating the law from the very beginning, rather than charging into a legal battle like a bull in a china shop. I opted to adopt a more strategic, long-term approach. Sarah and I began to meticulously record every infraction, every holdup, and every expense that this fence incurred. My grandfather often said, "Measure twice, cut once," and I intended to keep measuring until Vivian was drained by legal costs, every delayed delivery, every cow that was harmed due to the hazardous detour, every emergency veterinary call that was missed. All of it was added to our expanding file when my champion bull strained a shoulder muscle while trying to get through the difficult alternative route. The resulting $2,800 vet bill was photographed, recorded, and stored away when a shipment of hay went bad, costing me $1,200 because the delivery truck couldn't get to my barn. The receipt for that also went into the pile. However, Vivian was not one to remain passive. She initiated a media offensive that would have impressed Joseph Goebbels. The Millbrook Gazette abruptly published an editorial with the headline, "Agricultural Anachronism Impedes Community Progress." The editor, Jim Hartley, another transplant from Dallas who had likely never encountered a cow outside of a hamburger, penned 3 articles arguing that ranching activities were not in harmony with contemporary residential life. Unnamed sources were quoted complaining about declining property values and the safety of children near cattle, although I noted that none of these supposedly worried parents were willing to be identified. Sarah countered by launching a Facebook page named Heritage Ranch Defense. While Vivian's supporters posted grievances about early morning sounds and the sight of farm machinery, Sarah posted historical pictures and informative pieces about sustainable farming. The online arguments became so intense that Facebook began to mark posts for breaching community guidelines. Vivian's subsequent tactic was to overwhelm us with red tape. She inundated the county with complaints regarding ranch infractions, septic system checks, reviews of building permits, and scrutiny of livestock licenses. Everything my family had been doing lawfully for 60 years was suddenly subject to investigation. Inspector Rodriguez became a frequent guest, arriving with various clipboards and an increasingly apologetic demeanor. "Ezra, someone is lodging complaints more rapidly than I can look into them," he confessed after his 5th visit yielded no violations. "You run the cleanest operation in the county, yet they persist in calling for inspections." The harassment extended beyond mere bureaucratic hassles. Unsigned letters were sent to my feed suppliers, alleging that I was having financial difficulties. Bob Watson from the feed store called me, bewildered. "Ezra, I've been told you're behind on your payments, but your account has been in good standing for 15 years. Sarah's veterinary clinic was also targeted. A number of her clients received anonymous calls that cast doubt on her connection to a problem property. Dr. Martinez from the county animal hospital shared that someone had inquired about Sarah's professional license and raised concerns about her conduct. The late-night silent calls began during that same period. The phone would ring at all times of the day and night. When we picked up, there was no one on the line. The piercing sound of our home phone at 2 a.m. became as predictable as the rooster's crow at sunrise. My response was to enhance our security with professional-grade cameras that had live streaming features. Within a few days, I had captured HOA board members taking pictures of my ranch from the fence line, gathering evidence for their campaign of harassment. The video recordings showed Vivian orchestrating this intelligence-gathering effort like the director of a suburban CIA. In Texas, it is illegal to photograph private property from a neighboring location without permission, and this is considered surveillance harassment, particularly when it is done repeatedly with the intent to intimidate. This was another infraction to add to our legal collection. Vivian then attempted to use insurance against me. She got in touch with my ranch's liability insurance provider, asserting that my cattle operation posed a heightened fire hazard to the adjacent homes. She contended that livestock operations should have specialized coverage and face higher premiums because of the risk of wildfires. The insurance inspector who came to assess the situation was a third-generation rancher from Lufkin. He took one look at my defensible space management and fire prevention strategies and ended up renewing my policy at a reduced rate. "This is the best fire safety I've seen in a long time," he commented. Grazed pastures act as natural fire breaks. Despite Vivian's campaign of pressure, community support continued to build. The Texas Cattlemen's Association allocated $15,000 for my legal defense fund after learning about the situation. The local agricultural newspaper published a cover story titled "Family Ranch Under Siege," and state representatives began to get calls from agricultural lobbying organizations. However, Vivian was also experiencing financial strain. The HOA's legal expenses had surpassed $40,000, and the special assessments were as unwelcome as a tax hike. A number of homeowners started asking for a detailed breakdown of expenses, and the new treasurer found discrepancies in the fence contracting that suggested kickbacks were involved. The turning point occurred when my ranch hand, Miguel, was injured while using the hazardous detour. His truck went into a washout on the alternate road, and the back injury he sustained necessitated surgery and several months of workers' compensation. The prospect of a liability lawsuit prompted Vivian's insurance provider to ask some pointed questions about the role the fence played in creating dangerous conditions. As I waited in the hospital during Miguel's spinal surgery, something within me snapped. "For 40 years, my family has worked this land without causing harm to anyone," I said to Sarah. "Now, her power plays are endangering people." Sarah's fury was more subdued but also more potent. She overstepped when she threatened to have ICE investigate our workers. All of our staff were legal residents with the correct paperwork, but Vivian's threat to use immigration enforcement as a weapon exposed the deep-seated racism beneath her polished suburban exterior. Even some members of the HOA board recoiled from that particular threat. It appears there is a distinction between disputes over property and ethnic intimidation that makes people uneasy. The crucial piece of information was uncovered when Garrett's paralegal found liens on Vivian's personal assets: a staggering $180,000 in credit card debt, overdue mortgage payments, and a concealed bankruptcy filing laid bare her dire financial state. All at once, everything fell into place. Vivian wasn't contending over matters of principle. She was counting on the sale of my ranch to resolve her own financial troubles. The next morning, County Inspector Rodriguez made an unannounced visit to Willowbrook, carrying violation reports that had been submitted anonymously. He issued $25,000 in fines for unpermitted electrical work, incorrect fence installation, and violations of building codes. I hadn't been the one to call Rodriguez. It seems that when you apply too much pressure on people, some will eventually push back. That afternoon, 3 members of the HOA board stepped down, calling for an independent financial audit. The adversary of my adversary had now become my ally. The major advancement occurred on a damp Thursday morning when Garrett's paralegal contacted me with a level of enthusiasm typically associated with winning the lottery or a flawless weather report. "Mr. Thornfield, you must come down to the office immediately," Lisa almost murmured into the phone. "We've uncovered something significant." Sarah and I journeyed through the light rain to Garrett's office, where Lisa had laid out documents on the conference table as if she were cracking a murder investigation. The stale scent of old courthouse records blended with the aroma of fresh coffee as she indicated a misplaced folder she had found hidden among the property records. "The original Willowbrook Development Agreement," she declared, pointing to a substantial folder with barely restrained excitement. "It was filed in 2019 but somehow got placed in the incorrect filing cabinet." Garrett took the crucial document, a conditional use permit that had authorized residential construction on agricultural land. His finger followed the text down to Section 12, and I observed his lawyerly composure dissolve into a smile that could have illuminated all of Dallas. "I'll be damned," he murmured. "Get a load of this. The developer commits to preserving compatibility with the agricultural character and will not limit, obstruct, or disrupt existing agricultural activities as a prerequisite for this permit." Sarah leaned in, her veterinarian's precision cutting through the legal terminology. "What does that mean precisely?" "It means," Garrett went on, "that any act that hinders current agricultural operations invalidates the entire development permit. The county is empowered to nullify the occupancy permits for all 127 houses." It was the ultimate weapon. Vivian's fence was not merely a violation of my rights. It had the potential to compel every family in Willowbrook to move. But there was more to the story. Lisa produced a set of communications between the initial developer and the county planning department, which included emails that had been sent to Blackwood at LL.com. She was aware, I stated, looking at the proof of Vivian's prior knowledge. She knew about the agricultural protection clause from the very beginning. Garrett gave a somber nod. Her Dallas firm was the legal representative for the original developer. She intentionally withheld this information from the HOA board and the residents. That constitutes legal malpractice and a violation of her fiduciary responsibility to the clients she now represents. A friend of Sarah's in the banking industry had supplied another vital clue. Vivian's mortgage was in default, with foreclosure proceedings set to commence within 90 days. An investigation into insurance fraud for an exaggerated theft claim from the previous year had led to her assets being frozen, and her precarious financial state was the reason for her aggressive actions against the ranch. The scheme ran even deeper. Text messages obtained from the phone of a dissatisfied HOA member revealed Vivian was collaborating with a commercial real estate developer to transform the entire area into a strip mall. Her promised compensation of a $50,000 consulting fee for arranging the ranch's sale exposed the genuine reason behind her community activism. Even her private investigator was working for both sides. He had given our team copies of all his surveillance findings. His conscience apparently troubled by the sight of decent people being ruined for financial gain. The environmental situation also deteriorated for Vivian. A professional survey of the wetlands showed that her fence was obstructing the natural flow of water, causing spring floods to be diverted onto my ranch land. The report from the environmental engineers was damning. The fence poses a flood risk, is in violation of state water laws, and could result in EPA fines of $50,000 per day until the issue is rectified. I settled back into Garrett's leather chair, the various pieces of the puzzle falling into place like a finely crafted machine. We didn't have to endure a protracted legal battle. We simply had to hold out until Vivian's financial situation completely unraveled. With each passing day that the fence stood, the HOA's legal exposure mounted. While her personal debts continued to accumulate, insurance providers were already starting to drop their policies due to the risk of violations, and the anonymous informant had distributed financial records to every resident of Willowbrook. The truth was spreading through the subdivision like a brushfire. Their HOA funds had been used to finance a personal vendetta, not for the betterment of the community. Sarah's medical research had uncovered yet another line of attack. A number of children in Willowbrook suffered from livestock allergies, which had actually lessened with some exposure to the ranch animals. Pediatric research indicated that proximity to agriculture helped to strengthen childhood immune systems, thus refuting every public health claim made against the ranch. We possess all the trump cards, I said out loud. Legal, financial, community backing, environmental regulations, everything. Sarah placed a gentle hand on my arm. The real question is how we choose to play them. We are not like them, Ezra. We will win this with our integrity intact. She was correct. This was about more than just triumphing over Vivian. It was about safeguarding something precious while maintaining our own moral compass. It was time to switch from a defensive posture to a controlled, honorable offensive. That night, our kitchen table resembled a military command center. Garrett arranged legal papers alongside Sarah's veterinary publications, while Tom Rodriguez from the Cattlemen's Association examined county regulations over my mother's fine china. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the gravity of the task at hand as we laid out our coordinated attack. We'll apply pressure from multiple angles at once, Garrett detailed, outlining our plan on a yellow legal notepad. We'll highlight the ranch's value to the community, expose the HOA's corruption, compel Vivian to resign, and at the same time, mend relationships with the neighbors. During lunch, Sarah's contact in the banking industry had explained the intricacies of foreclosure to her. I had learned from my own close call during the 2008 drought that the primary mortgage lender has the first right to the assets. But there are always avenues for innovative financing. There was a chance we could acquire Vivian's debt at a reduced price and thereby manage the timing of the foreclosure, which would help the neighbors by preventing a collapse in property values while also resolving our issue. The task of gathering evidence began the next morning. I engaged Jensen Surveying to precisely map the easement lines using GPS, and then I hired a drone pilot to record aerial views that clearly showed the fence's illegal positioning. The local historical society supplied photographs from the 1960s for comparison, which provided visual proof that even the aging eyes of Judge Hartwell could not miss. Sarah initiated her community engagement efforts with the same zeal she typically reserved for healing sick creatures. Heritage ranch tours became a regular weekend activity, where neighbors could learn about sustainable farming, local food sources, and responsible land management. The scent of fresh milk and the taste of grass-fed beef samples were more persuasive than any legal argument could ever be. 15 families endorsed our petition in favor of the ranch's activities after hearing Sarah describe how rotational grazing actually enhances water quality and soil condition. Mrs. Patterson from Elm Street even inquired about purchasing our beef directly, stating she was weary of supermarket meat that lacked both flavor and substance. Garrett put together what he termed our legal multiplex strategy. We would file complaints in several different courts at the same time. A federal complaint regarding violations of agricultural grants would initiate a Treasury Department investigation. A state complaint about wetland infringements would lead to environmental enforcement action. A county complaint for breaches of building codes would compel immediate remedies, and an internal lawsuit against the HOA for breach of fiduciary duty would create personal liability for those involved. I had professional grade scales installed at the ranch's entrance to record the exact weight and time of every delayed delivery. The time-lapse camera setup documented the normal day-to-day activities of the ranch. Cattle grazing peacefully, trucks bringing in feed, and Sarah's veterinary patients coming for their appointments. This provided visual proof that our commercial traffic was nothing more than honest agricultural work. The network of supporters continued to grow. Like ripples spreading across a lake, the Texas Cattle Raisers Association officially declared their backing and matched our legal defense fund. Dollar for dollar, the Farm Bureau offered research support, and the state agricultural department proposed to mediate. Even the local Chamber of Commerce endorsed us, recognizing the ranch as a heritage tourism destination. Our fund for the legal battle swelled to $35,000 from community contributions, which was then matched by agricultural organizations. In addition to pro bono services from Sarah's veterinary clients, the crowdfunding campaign attracted national interest from advocates for property rights who had encountered similar pressures from suburban areas. Professional photographs captured the damage caused by the fence installation, and soil analysis confirmed that the blocked road was disrupting natural drainage. Traffic analyses revealed accelerated deterioration of the alternative routes, and the insurance adjuster estimated the total damages to the ranch to be $78,000. Every postponed delivery, every harmed animal, every expense incurred due to stress. Sarah delved into Vivian's psychological makeup as if she were diagnosing a particularly intricate medical condition. The recurring pattern of increasingly aggressive harassment, threats, and attempts at intimidation pointed to an individual who was losing her grip due to financial strain. We arranged for an expert psychologist, who specializes in cases of neighbor harassment, to provide testimony. The coordinated campaign of regulatory pressure was launched like a barrage of artillery. An investigation by the Texas State Bar for practicing law without a license, a review by the county DA for potential fraud in the misuse of HOA funds, an inquiry from the IRS regarding the tax-exempt status. Given the documented violations, every regulatory body received complaints simultaneously. The technological measures we implemented included motion-sensitive cameras placed at 12 different spots along the fence's edge. GPS trackers on the ranch vehicles recorded the precise costs and time lost due to detours. A mobile app logged the exact moments when access was denied, and professional sound equipment was used to compare the actual noise levels with Vivian's exaggerated complaints. We devised several contingency plans based on different possible results. A win in court would establish a precedent for other ranchers who were up against similar pressures. A settlement would create a model agreement that would safeguard agricultural activities. If we were compelled to move, we would guarantee that our new property had unassailable access rights. Our long-term planning involved crafting easement language that would prevent any such interference in the future. The final preparations felt like loading ammunition before a decisive battle. Garrett submitted our extensive federal lawsuit, 340 pages of evidence, complete with a video appendix, expert witnesses lined up, deposition scheduled, and a court date set for a preliminary injunction hearing in 45 days. Standing on my porch as the sun set, watching the cattle graze peacefully in the fields my grandfather had improved with his own 2 hands, I felt the immense weight of history and responsibility. The aroma of mesquite smoke wafted from Sarah's barbecue, while the evening birds sang from the ancient oak trees. Granddad built this road with his own calloused hands. He worked until after dark every day. I remarked to Sarah as she came to sit with me on the porch steps. She gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, her touch both warm and firm. He would be so proud of the way you're fighting for it. Not just for the land, but for the principle. Tomorrow, we would learn if David could still triumph over Goliath, especially when David had superior legal counsel and Goliath had financially overextended herself to the point of bankruptcy. It was showtime. Trapped animals are the most perilous, and Vivian was on the verge of demonstrating that suburban predators adhere to the same principle. The acts of sabotage commenced at midnight on a Tuesday. I was awakened by the sound of cattle lowing an alarm, a noise that can get any rancher up and moving more swiftly than a fire alarm. I rushed out in my underwear and boots, my flashlight beam piercing the darkness, to discover that the water lines had been severed and the cattle troughs were empty. Having 30 head of cattle without water in the August heat is not only a financial burden. It is a direct threat to their lives. While Sarah arranged for an emergency water delivery, I reviewed the security camera footage. It showed a clear image of a person dressed in dark attire near the fence line, with bolt cutters reflecting the infrared light. Sheriff Patterson came at sunrise, his expression serious, carrying evidence bags. Ezra, these bolt cutters have distinct fingerprints on them. They are a match for Vivian Blackwood's prints from her driver's license renewal. Criminal charges were brought within a few hours for destruction of property and agricultural terrorism. In Texas, obstructing livestock operations is a serious offense, particularly when it jeopardizes the well-being of the animals. However, Vivian's nighttime escapade was merely the initial volley in her increasingly desperate campaign. Anonymous leaflets began to appear all over Millbrook, asserting that our ranch was spreading disease through contaminated water sources. The health department received unsigned complaints about improper management of cattle waste and the potential for E. coli contamination. Dr. Sarah was confronted with a complaint to the veterinary board, which accused her of unsafe practices and not upholding sanitary standards. An individual, using a false name and a Dallas phone number, had submitted detailed allegations regarding our ranch's operations, compelling Sarah to undergo a formal inquiry that could put her license at risk. The financial strain intensified when First National Bank unexpectedly called for the early repayment of my equipment loans, demanding $60,000 immediately. The loan officer was extremely apologetic, citing changes in policy and updated risk evaluations. But I was not fooled. It turned out that Vivian's brother-in-law was employed by the loan servicing company. This was a blatant conflict of interest and a likely breach of banking regulations. But the impact was instantaneous. I had to sell 12 head of my best cattle to meet the manufactured deadline. Taking a loss on animals I had intended to keep through the winter, Friday morning brought a new form of attack. Environmental warfare. Dead fish started to surface in Cottonwood Creek, downstream from our ranch. An anonymous report to the EPA alleged that contamination from cattle waste was responsible for the death of the aquatic life. The emergency inspector who came to investigate was a sharp young woman from Austin. She glanced at the fish and began to laugh. "Sir, these are saltwater fish, red snapper and flounder. In a freshwater creek, 50 miles from the Gulf, someone has placed them here overnight. Committing environmental fraud is a federal crime, and whoever orchestrated this had just broken a serious law while attempting to frame us for environmental wrongdoing." Vivian's last-ditch legal effort was to seek an emergency restraining order, asserting that the ranch's activities posed a threat to public safety. She claimed that cattle could get loose and pose a danger to schoolchildren, and she supported her claim with pictures of recently damaged fence sections that appeared suspiciously new. Judge Morrison, who had been a rancher himself, examined the evidence during his lunch break and dismissed the order with obvious annoyance. "Counsel, these cattle have been on this land for 40 years without a single problem. The only threat I see here is from baseless lawsuits." The insurance scheme played out like a poorly written comedy. A series of claims were filed against our ranch's policy, including allegations of slips and falls, reports of property damage, and noise complaints that claimed hearing loss from the sound of the cattle. The insurance investigator sent to assess the claims was a shrewd former detective who quickly uncovered a coordinated effort to commit fraud. The phone numbers were all traced back to the same call center in Dallas, and the medical reports were signed by doctors who had never actually seen the supposed victims. Vivian's personal liability insurance was promptly terminated due to fraudulent activity, leaving her financially vulnerable to any damages that would be awarded in our impending lawsuit. The campaign of community intimidation was directed at our supporters, who received threatening letters regarding their property taxes and potential violations of residential zoning. A number of families who had endorsed our petition were sent warnings that their support for commercial agriculture could jeopardize their residential status. Fear is a potent tool, and several neighbors chose to retract their support rather than face the risk of bureaucratic harassment. Vivian was effectively terrorizing the entire community in an effort to isolate us. County Commissioner Jackson found himself under political duress when Vivian's contacts in Dallas insisted on unannounced inspections of the ranch. The fire marshal, the health department, and a building inspector all arrived for a joint 4-hour search, which resulted in 0 violations and confirmed our excellent safety protocols. Jackson called me that evening to express his regret. Politics can be a nasty game, Ezra, but this is nothing short of harassment. Make sure you document everything. The threats escalated from property disputes to a more personal level when anonymous calls began to target Sarah's practice. And our college-age children were mentioned by name. When threats are made across state lines, they become a matter for the federal authorities, and the FBI initiated an interstate investigation. Unfamiliar men in pickup trucks started to take pictures of our ranch from the public roads, and their license plates were traced to a security firm in Dallas. The owner confirmed that he had contracts for surveillance with concerned citizens, but stated that the investigation had gone beyond what was authorized. Sarah retaliated by lodging complaints against Vivian for practicing veterinary medicine without a license. After Vivian had diagnosed a neighbor's dog with stress due to its proximity to the cattle and had suggested treatment plans, digital forensics traced the fake social media profiles that were spreading false information about the ranch's finances to a single IP address. Vivian's home internet, charges of social engineering and fraud were added to her accumulating legal issues. Her ultimate desperate act was to be recorded discussing a plan to set the fence on fire and then blame it on a fire hazard from the ranch. Sheriff Patterson promptly issued a warrant for her arrest on charges of making terroristic threats and conspiracy to commit arson. The HOA board convened an emergency session that evening and suspended Vivian from all her responsibilities, while her husband initiated divorce proceedings, citing emotional abuse. When desperate individuals have nothing more to lose, they tend to make critical errors. Vivian had just made hers. The FBI raid took place at 5:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, and a significant portion of Willowbrook watched from their homes as federal agents carried out search warrants at Vivian's residence. The spectacle of evidence boxes being carried into unmarked vehicles while Vivian stood in handcuffs, clad in her designer pajamas, was more entertaining than any reality television program. By midday, the footage of her being escorted by police was all over social media, accompanied by hashtags like #HOAKaren and #RanchJustice. The national news outlets picked up on the story, with headlines such as Texas Ranch versus HOA Tyranny, and agricultural advocacy organizations held support rallies from Montana to Florida. Vivian's precarious financial situation came crashing down more swiftly than a barn in a windstorm. The foreclosure auction of her oversized home failed to attract a single bidder at its starting price. It seemed no one was interested in a property that was entangled in federal criminal charges and was the subject of widespread community animosity. The bank repossessed the house and immediately put it on the market for $50,000 less than its assessed value. Sarah and I gave serious thought to purchasing it as a guest house, but we concluded that the sheer irony of such a move might just finish Vivian off before the justice system had its chance. The criminal proceedings were a prosecutor's ideal scenario. A grand jury handed down an indictment on 23 federal charges, which included wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. Money laundering charges were added to the list after financial investigators found that her fraudulent activities dated back to her disbarment in California. The prosecutor was aiming for a 15-year sentence, given her history as a repeat offender. In the meantime, the newly formed HOA board engaged a crisis management company and released a public apology that sounded like a confession to war crimes. The removal of the fence was set for the next week, and they proposed a settlement that was so generous it made my eyes well up. $275,000. In addition to covering all legal costs, the process of community reconciliation kicked off with a Ranch Appreciation Day, an event put together by the new HOA leadership that attracted 200 neighbors. For tours, educational sessions, and a barbecue, children had the chance to pet the gentle cattle. While their parents gained insights into sustainable farming and heritage conservation, the local restaurant owner, Mike Peterson, provided the catering for the event, featuring beef raised on our ranch, and the look of delight on the children's faces at the petting zoo made all the legal struggles seem worthwhile. Observing suburban families forging a connection with the agricultural way of life served as a reminder of the very reason we had been fighting. The environmental cleanup began as soon as the fence was gone. Experts in creek restoration worked to fix the drainage systems, and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department officially designated our ranch as a conservation partner. Our innovative program for the coexistence of agriculture and residential areas is now being examined by universities throughout Texas. The case set a legal precedent. Within a month, 3 similar lawsuits were filed against HOAs, all employing our strategic approach. Garrett's law firm has since specialized in property rights cases, and agricultural conferences have begun to invite me as a speaker to recount our experience. Vivian's plea deal negotiations, conducted from the county jail, brought to light the full extent of her criminal activities. Her collaboration with the FBI's investigation uncovered a pattern of systemic fraud that affected multiple HOA communities. With a management company siphoning off millions of dollars from community funds, the educational opportunities continue to multiply. Students of agricultural law at the university are studying our case, and the ranch has become a research location. For models of sustainable development, a scholarly article titled Balancing Agricultural Heritage with Residential Growth has been published, lending credence to everything we had been advocating about the value of our community. Insurance settlements began to arrive from various companies, covering damages for harassment, professional liability for the HOA board, and punitive damages for claims handled in bad faith. The total insurance payouts surpassed $400,000, establishing a new standard for coverage of agricultural harassment across the country. The political repercussions were felt in Austin, where Texas legislators began to formulate the Agricultural Heritage Protection Act. This proposed law would make it a crime to harass long-standing agricultural businesses, with lawmakers from rural areas pointing to our case as a key factor. National agricultural lobbying groups are now advocating for similar laws in 12 other states. A PBS agricultural program featured our ranch's restoration in a nationally televised segment, which has led to inquiries about agritourism from all over the country. The educational worth of traditional ranching practices and environmental conservation has opened up new sources of income through tours, seminars, and heritage events. Technological advancements have arisen from our needs. Our intelligent gate system, which allows for automatic entry for emergency vehicles, has become a model that is being licensed to agricultural businesses nationwide. The traffic monitoring system prevents unauthorized entry while still permitting legitimate access. An innovation born out of struggle, local investors have contributed to the funding of projects to improve the ranch, and demonstration areas for sustainable farming methods have drawn in partnerships with the Agricultural Extension Service. The success of economic development through the preservation of heritage has shown that tradition and progress are not mutually exclusive. The legal precedent we set has safeguarded agricultural easement rights in federal court, with our case being referenced in similar legal battles from one coast to the other. The Thornfield Standard is now mandatory reading in property law classes, providing long-term protection for agricultural businesses that are under pressure from development. Vivian's reputation has been so completely tarnished that other aggressive HOA leaders have begun to reconsider their approaches. The message was unmistakable. The price of harassment now outweighs any possible gains, and there is a growing cultural shift towards valuing agricultural heritage. Community investment in our ranch has reached a level that would have made my granddad swell with pride. The research collaborations, educational initiatives, and economic growth through preservation have fostered the very kind of community spirit he imagined when he first built that road. The psychological triumph was absolute. Vivian has become a cautionary tale, recounted in legal workshops and HOA board meetings throughout the United States. What occurs when suburban privilege collides with rural resolve and superior legal counsel? As we readied ourselves for the town hall meeting that would bring a formal close to everything, I came to realize that we had achieved more than just a legal victory. We had managed to protect something invaluable while simultaneously creating something even better. Justice was about to be administered Texas-style. The Millbrook County Community Center had not witnessed such a large gathering since the high school state football championship win in 1987. 400 individuals crammed into a room meant for 200. with people lining the walls and overflowing into the parking lot. Where speakers broadcasted the event to the additional attendees, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the kitchen mingled with a palpable tension, while local news teams and agricultural reporters, along with property rights bloggers, vied for the best vantage points. The flash of cameras went off like fireflies as people settled into the creaking folding chairs, burdened by the significance of the occasion. Sarah and I were seated in the front row, flanked by 3 generations of ranching families who had traveled from all over East Texas to see justice prevail. Seated behind us, the new HOA board members appeared as though they were on trial themselves. 5 repentant neighbors hoping to atone for their community's transgressions. County Commissioner Jackson was the first to speak, delivering a proclamation that had been 4 decades in the making. The Agricultural Heritage Preservation Resolution. This resolution acknowledged the Thornfield family's 60 years of service to the community and provided lasting protection for established agricultural businesses. A round of applause filled the cinder block room for a full 2 minutes, sweeping through the space like a wave of thunder. Sarah was in tears, marking the first time our name was publicly cleared after enduring months of harassment, threats, and sleepless nights filled with the fear of losing everything my granddad had built. Martha Hendricks, the newly appointed president of the HOA board, approached the microphone, her hands trembling like leaves in the wind. Her voice wavered as she recited the official letter of apology, which had been signed by all 127 homeowners. "We let fear and bias contaminate our community," she conceded, her words resonating in the hushed room. "We overlooked the fact that diversity encompasses agricultural heritage and that advancement is achieved through collaboration, not domination." The announcement of the financial compensation elicited audible surprise from the crowd. A settlement check for $275,000 was presented in public, along with an additional $100,000 to cover legal costs from the HOA's insurance, and a further $50,000 in community grants designated for the ranch's educational initiatives. As Martha presented the documents, the sound of applause overwhelmed her voice, and the attendees got to their feet. The noise of clapping hands blended with the stomping of boots and shouts of "hell yeah" from the back of the room. Where the cattlemen were seated, County Judge Williams then handed me a symbolic sledgehammer for the ceremony of taking down the fence. "Let this be a strike for the rights of property owners and for good sense," he declared, and the crowd started a countdown as I took a swing at the section of fence post that had been brought for the event. The sharp sound of metal on metal echoed through the hall like a church bell. The sound of justice being served and the start of community reconciliation. Sarah took to the microphone to deliver her victim impact statements, detailing the months of anxiety, the disruption to our business, and the strain on our family with the dispassionate clarity of a medical report. Ranch hand Miguel shared his story of being injured on the treacherous detour. His words imbued with the quiet pride of a hardworking man whose livelihood had been unjustly jeopardized. The testimonies from neighbors brought to light the extent of the discord that Vivian had sown. Families that had coexisted in harmony for years had been pitted against one another by baseless fears and a sense of suburban superiority. Boxes of tissues were circulated among the attendees as the emotional stories were told. Sheriff Patterson provided an account of the 47 distinct criminal complaints that were lodged during the dispute, while FBI agent Morrison elaborated on the financial fraud investigation that had led to the recovery of $2.3 million that had been embezzled from various HOAs throughout Texas. Vivian's suburban reign of terror had been a criminal operation that affected 5 different housing developments. The educational portion of the event featured Agricultural Extension Agent Rodriguez, who explained the fundamentals of easement law using visual aids that highlighted property rights and the community advantages of agriculture. His main point struck a chord with the capacity crowd. Functioning farms are a vital part of rural communities, both economically and culturally, and their heritage is something that should be safeguarded. National Public Radio was broadcasting the event live for their weekend show, while photographers from agricultural magazines were there to capture the moments of community reconciliation. Property rights blogger Jennifer Walsh was live-streaming to an audience of 15,000, her commentary perfectly encapsulating the scene. This is a true display of democracy in rural America. An unexpected guest brought tears to the eyes of people who hadn't shed any since they were children. My 89-year-old uncle had made the trip from Oklahoma. He was part of the original crew that built the road in 1962, having worked alongside my granddad to lay the very groundwork for this conflict. "We constructed that road for the entire community," he stated, his weathered voice filled with 6 decades of conviction. "Every single rock, every bit of gravel, every bead of sweat was for the sake of neighbors supporting one another." The standing ovation went on for 5 minutes as he gave me a hug on the stage. 2 generations of Thornfield grit brought together in triumph. The new Good Neighbor Agreement was formally signed in front of the cameras. The ranch would offer agricultural education and emergency grazing, while the HOA would be responsible for road maintenance and would respect agricultural activities. A relationship of mutual advantage took the place of one of antagonism. The local high school's FFA chapter honored us with a conservation award, and students spoke about what they had learned from agricultural operations. The dedication of the younger generation to upholding the farming tradition gave us optimism for ongoing peaceful coexistence. The vote on the resolution was unanimous. The Agricultural Heritage Protection Resolution created a county ordinance that safeguards established agricultural businesses. This legal framework, designed to prevent future harassment of ranchers, has become a model for rural communities across the country. My final remarks were met with a roaring applause. My grandfather used to say that this land would be a benefit to the community for all time. I scanned the crowded room, observing faces that now shone with hope instead of apprehension. Today's events have proven him right, though perhaps not in the way anyone might have anticipated. The deafening applause and the 5-minute standing ovation conveyed everything that was left to be said. Justice had been served, Texas style, with our dignity preserved and our community more united than it had ever been. 6 months have passed, and I'm enjoying my morning coffee on the porch, watching the cattle graze contentedly in the fields they have called home for 60 years. Cottonwood Creek Road is now managed by the Smart Gate system, which has become a standard for agricultural businesses nationwide. It provides monitored access that safeguards our privacy while permitting legitimate passage. The road maintenance agreement is functioning just as my granddad had hoped. Monthly data indicates a 40% reduction in traffic due to the improved alternate routes, and the shared expenses have allowed us to upgrade our infrastructure to a level we could never have achieved on our own. The transformation of the ranch has surpassed all our expectations. Our agricultural tourism now attracts 200 visitors each month for Heritage Ranch Experience weekends, with bookings extending well into the next year. The income from educational seminars on sustainable ranching and property rights has given us a financial buffer against the uncertainties of cattle prices and weather. Following the resolution of the conflict, property values in Willowbrook have risen by 8%. It appears that genuine agricultural charm is a draw for families in search of a more balanced way of life. Rather than the uniformity of a typical subdivision, Henderson's restaurant now boasts our Heritage Ranch menu, featuring ingredients sourced directly from our ranch, and the economic growth spurred by agricultural tourism has become a blueprint for other rural communities. Vivian is currently serving an 18-month sentence in a federal prison, to be followed by 3 years of probation, and has been ordered to pay $850,000 in restitution to her numerous victims. Her professional licenses have been permanently taken away, and her case is now a staple in legal ethics classes, serving as a warning about the consequences of suburban entitlement clashing with federal law. The legal impact of our case continues to expand. The federal court's decisions have been referenced in 23 agricultural rights cases, establishing what is now known as the Thornfield Standard for protecting easements. Property law courses in law schools now require the study of our complete case, and agricultural advocacy organizations use our strategy as a basis for their legislative efforts nationwide. Texas A&M is now using our ranch as a demonstration site, and university research teams are studying models for sustainable coexistence. Published research has confirmed the economic advantages of preserving agricultural land, which provides academic support for businesses that are facing pressure from development. The restoration of the creek has earned state environmental accolades, and the enhanced wildlife habitats have brought back deer, turkey, and migratory birds in quantities I haven't witnessed since I was a child. The wetland designation now shields the property from any future development, and carbon sequestration initiatives are providing new sources of income. The most gratifying outcome has been the healing within our family. Sarah's veterinary practice is flourishing, thanks to the supportive community, and our college-age children have returned home with pride in their parents' unwavering principles. The health problems that were brought on by stress during the conflict have all disappeared. The Agricultural Heritage Education Foundation, which was established with the funds from the settlement, now offers yearly scholarships to students from rural areas who are pursuing studies in agriculture, law, and environmental science. The inaugural recipients, 3 graduates from our local area, are a testament to a lasting legacy, guaranteeing that our struggle will have a lasting positive impact on the community. National acclaim continues to mount. The PBS documentary, Small Town, Big Rights, has been awarded regional Emmys, and agricultural publications provide yearly updates on our progress. Property rights groups feature our case in their fundraising campaigns, and the speaking engagements keep us on the road. Attending conferences throughout the United States, similar victories have been achieved in Montana, Oklahoma, and North Carolina, all employing our strategic model, with law firms specializing in agricultural rights now citing our case in their promotional materials. Property owners across the country have been inspired to stand up against the overreach of HOAs, leading to a cultural shift towards a greater respect for agricultural heritage rights. The annual Heritage Day Festival now draws in 5,000 attendees for agricultural showcases, educational sessions on property rights, and a variety of local food stands. The festival generates an annual economic benefit of $200,000 for local businesses, transforming negative press into positive recognition that advantages everyone. Our son has declared his intention to come back to the ranch after he finishes his degree in agricultural engineering, and our daughter is now studying agricultural law. Inspired by our family's legal triumph, the succession plan for the ranch is in place, ensuring its continued operation and the preservation of its legacy for the generations to come. The technological advancements that were born out of our struggle have evolved into a new business venture. We are now licensing our SmartGate system to agricultural businesses across the country, which brings in revenue to support improvements on the ranch and also assists others in resolving similar access issues. As I stand here, observing the morning mist dissipating from the fields that my grandfather himself enhanced, I can smell the mesquite smoke from Sarah's breakfast cooking, while the cattle make their way slowly towards the water. The evening strolls down our own road have brought back the simple joys that the suburban harassment had taken from us. The lesson learned extends far beyond the confines of our property lines. Standing up for one's principles does more than just protect individual rights. It fortifies the very fabric of a community. Agricultural operations are not merely surviving in rural areas. They are helping communities to prosper, both economically and culturally. It seems that sometimes David can still defeat Goliath, particularly when David has superior legal counsel and Goliath has financially overextended herself to the point of bankruptcy. Please share your own HOA horror stories in the comments section below. You are not the only one facing these challenges. Be sure to subscribe for more tales of property rights victories and insights into rural life, because these are narratives that deserve to be heard. Always keep in mind that the most effective defense can sometimes be a well-planned offense, supported by a strong legal plan. Next week, we'll cover how a farmer transformed a noise complaint into a $50,000 settlement. Another story of David versus a suburban Goliath. The road stretches on into the golden Texas evening, accessible to all who have a right to be there, just as my granddad intended. That concludes today's episode of End for HOA. If you found satisfaction in seeing karma at work, please hit the like button, share your opinions in the comments, and tell us if you have also had to contend with the absurdities of an HOA. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on the next HOA debacle we feature.